Moving in with Noah and his family was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. We had just gotten married, and I thought it would be nice to settle into his family home for a while. But from the very start, things felt off. Ruth, Noah's mother, was kind enough to welcome me into her home, but I quickly realized that her kindness came with strings attached. She had high expectations, and nothing I did seemed to satisfy her. Every time I cooked, she would criticize the smallest details. "Emma, you forgot to add salt again," or "you didn't chop the onions finely enough." I tried to brush it off at first, but it started wearing me down. I had spent years building my career and my identity as a designer, but here I was, a newlywed, reduced to doing the household chores under Ruth's watchful eye. I knew Noah loved me, but he didn't seem to care when his mother would criticize me. At first, I thought maybe Noah just didn't notice. He was busy with work, and when he was home, he seemed exhausted. But as the days passed, I realized he wasn't oblivious. He was indifferent. Every time I tried to talk to him about how Ruth was treating me, he brushed it off. "She's old, Emma," he would say. "She's been through a lot. Just help her out." He never once stood up for me, and that hurt more than I expected. It felt like Noah and his mother were a team, and I was just an outsider in their little world. I tried to talk to him about how much I was struggling, but all he ever did was defend his mother. "You're not working," he would remind me. "You have the time to do all of this, so why complain?" I tried my best to keep everything in balance, to make Noah and his family happy, but it felt like nothing was ever enough. I'd spend hours in the kitchen, making dinner for everyone, only for Ruth to complain about something, whether it was the seasoning or the presentation. No matter what I did, I felt invisible. I wasn't doing anything wrong, yet it seemed like Ruth could always find something to pick at. I started second-guessing myself. Should I have cut the vegetables thinner? Was the soup too salty? Was the garden neat enough? Each day felt like a test, and I was failing. I didn't want to argue with her, but it was exhausting trying to live up to an impossible standard. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve to be treated like I was incapable. One afternoon, I snapped. I had been working in the garden for hours, trying to make it look perfect for Noah and his family. But when Ruth saw the finished work, she pointed out every little thing that was wrong. "Emma, you missed a spot over there," she said, tapping her finger toward the edge of the flower bed. That was it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had done everything she asked and more, but nothing was ever good enough. I wanted to scream, to throw my hands up and walk out, but instead, I just stood there, defeated. I could feel the weight of Ruth's disapproval pressing down on me, and Noah wasn't there to back me up. Once again, I was left alone to shoulder the blame. I realized, in that moment, that I couldn't keep living like this. The following day, I decided to take a break. I went into town to run some errands, hoping to clear my head and escape the constant tension at home. When I got back, I expected to have a quiet evening alone, maybe catch up on some reading. But when I opened my closet to put my things away, my stomach dropped. Almost all of my clothes were gone. I frantically searched through the closet, but they were nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me. Where were they? I rushed to the living room, where Ruth was sitting, sipping her coffee as if everything was fine. "Where are my clothes?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Ruth looked up at me, as if she hadn't just destroyed a part of me. "Oh, I sold them," she said nonchalantly. "To a resale shop. We needed the money." I stood there in stunned silence. I had worked so hard for those clothes. They were my designs, my creations. I had spent years building my career as a designer, and now everything was gone. I was furious. How could she do that without asking me? My clothes weren't just fabric and thread, they were pieces of my soul, designs I had poured my heart into. I had sacrificed so much to build my career, and Ruth had sold it all without a second thought. "You can't just sell my things!" I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. But Ruth didn't even flinch. "You're not even working right now," she said, taking another sip of her coffee. "You don't need all those fancy clothes." Her words stung more than I could express. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about the lack of respect, the utter disregard for my hard work and my dreams. I had given up my career to focus on our family, and now it felt like I had lost everything. And Noah? He stood there, silent, doing nothing. In that moment, I couldn't stay another minute in that house. My anger and hurt had reached their limit. I walked out the door, leaving behind the family that never seemed to understand me. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I needed space, a place where I could breathe and think clearly. I checked into a small hotel in town, the kind of place that didn't care about status or wealth. It was a simple room, nothing fancy, but for the first time in a long time it felt like freedom. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to worry about pleasing anyone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could be myself again. The next few days were a blur. I didn't want to talk to Noah or Ruth. I didn't want to hear their excuses or apologies. I needed to focus on myself for once. As I spent time alone, I started to realize that I had been holding myself back for too long. I had given up my career, my dreams, all for the sake of Noah and his family. And what had I gotten in return? Disrespect, criticism, and betrayal. It was time to take control of my life again, to chase my dreams and not let anyone stand in my way. A few weeks later, I got a call from Matthew, my former boss. I had worked with him on several projects during my freelance days, and he had always been supportive of my work. He had heard about the fashion show that was happening in the city and needed someone to take the lead on a last-minute project. One of the main designers had fallen ill, and Matthew was in a bind. He asked if I would be interested in stepping in. At first, I hesitated. I hadn't designed anything in a while, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to jump back into the industry. But something inside me told me this was the opportunity I had been waiting for. I needed to prove to myself, and to everyone else, that I still had what it took. The fashion show was a big deal, with industry insiders, renowned designers, and models from all over the world. I couldn't pass it up. I agreed to take on the project, and from that moment on, I threw myself into it. I spent hours sketching, designing, and planning every detail. The work was grueling, but it felt good to be doing something I loved again. I had spent so much time feeling lost, but now I had a purpose again. I knew that this show would be my comeback, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. The day of the fashion show arrived, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nerves. As I walked into the venue, I was surrounded by some of the biggest names in the industry. It was both thrilling and overwhelming. I felt out of place, but at the same time, I felt like I had finally found my way back home. As I made my rounds, talking to old colleagues and acquaintances, I felt a sense of pride. This was my world. This was where I belonged. But then, out of nowhere, I felt someone tap me on the shoulder. I turned around, and to my surprise, there stood Noah. He looked awkward, as if he didn't belong in this world. "Emma," he said, his voice strained. "I know things haven't been great, but I've been thinking. I made a mistake. I should have supported you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this the same man who had belittled my career, who had mocked my ambitions? "Noah," I said, my voice calm but firm, "it's too late for apologies." I wasn't interested in his excuses anymore. Just then, someone walked up to us, It was Director Henry, one of the higher-ups from Noah's company. He had worked with me in the past, and we had collaborated on several projects. He looked at Noah and then at me, clearly surprised. "Emma?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "You're here as a designer?" Noah, still standing there awkwardly, nodded. "Yeah, that's Emma, my wife. She's unemployed, though. Doesn't really do much these days." Henry's expression turned red, and he shot Noah a sharp look. "Emma is one of the most respected designers in the industry," Henry said, his voice thick with disbelief. "You didn't know that about your own wife?" I could see the shock on Noah's face. He hadn't known. And in that moment, I realized that he had never truly understood who I was, what I was capable of. It wasn't just the clothes or the career. It was the way he had treated me all along. I had given so much of myself to that relationship, but Noah had never given me the respect I deserved. "Emma, I'm sorry," Noah said, his voice pleading. "I didn't realize. I messed up. Please come back. Let's try again." I stared at him, my heart heavy but resolute. "Noah, I'm done. I don't need your apology. I don't need your approval. I'm doing just fine on my own." With those words, I walked away from him, leaving behind the man who had never truly seen me. It was time to focus on my career and my future, not on someone who had failed to recognize my worth.